What's up, everybody? Welcome to Take No Offense. A couple of old friends who grew up together in Pennsylvania. Now we live on opposite sides of the country. This is our chance to get together weekly to share our thoughts on politics, news, sports, TV, movies. I'm Eric Messersmith in the Los Angeles area. Brian Johnson is in suburban Washington, D.C. What's up, buddy?
I noticed you left out the central. I think that's a key part for central Pennsylvania, because if you just say Pennsylvania, that can mean a lot of things. And as Arlen Specter, former congressman, senator, I believe, once said, you have
Senator, yes.
Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, and everything in between is northern Alabama.
That's true. No, that's actually very true. I think it was James Carville who said that, but Specter may have said it too.
It
Yeah,
would be
we
weird for him to say it, Specter, because
He was the
he's the
senator for Pennsylvania.
right.
Yeah. We grew up in Altoona, Pennsylvania, for those that don't know, which is near the center of the state, slightly south, slightly
Yeah,
west, near State College. But we'll fly over country. No, you're right. Central PA. Because
it's
when I say
important.
PA,
Yeah,
we could have grown up in downtown Philadelphia, you know?
it could have been
So, yeah,
Scranton. We could have
could have
been
been
at Dunder
Scranton.
Mifflin.
Absolutely. But no, from central Pennsylvania, now we get a chance to discuss, give our thoughts and opinions on various topics. Brian, since we've done the reboot here, which I think we're going on about 2 months now, 3 months.
Look at
We're,
us.
we're up to six-ish episodes. We talked a little bit about the presidential race, but we haven't really talked a lot about it. I wanted to talk about it through the prism of age, and particularly Biden's age, because we all know what the issues are, but there's no question that one of Biden's biggest liability, if not the biggest, is his age. At 81 years old, he'll be 82 by the end of the year. And he looks it. I mean, there's no question about it. If you compare Biden now to Biden when he was vice president, or I would even say to the Biden of 2020 when he was running last time, there is a noticeable decline, certainly physically. I mean, that's obvious to anyone who watches him. But I do think it's interesting because it, recently, particularly if you're active on X, I would say, you will see video clips of Biden all the time that make him look really old. And sometimes those clips are legitimate and sometimes they are deceptively edited, shall we say. There was one where he was at Normandy to give the 80th commencement address for the 80th anniversary of D-Day 2 weeks ago. And what was trending on X that morning wasn't anything he said in his speech. It was Biden pooping. And the reason that was trending is because there's a short clip where after another speaker finishes, Biden kind of isn't sure if he should sit down or not. And he reaches down and reaches for his chair. But in the video, you can't see the chair. So all you see is him kind of squatting and reaching for a few seconds, which looked awkward. But if you watch the longer clip, you see clearly, just like Macron, who was by him, and his wife, they were getting ready to sit down and he was looking for the chair. And if you actually watch the speech, which I know the vast majority of people don't, but I actually did, some kind of a nerd, and I went back and watched the speech that day. It was really good. Like, he delivered a really good speech about D-Day and tying it into the current moment we're in all these years later in terms of the strain of isolationism that's running through the West, and particularly here in America. He didn't mention Donald Trump, but clearly that's what he was referencing in part. But most people don't see the speech. I would gather to say many more people saw the Biden pooping trending on X and watched that short edited clip, that many more watched that than actually watched the speech. So there was another one of these things over the weekend where Biden was out here in the Los Angeles area where I am doing a massive fundraiser, raised $28 million. It was the one George Clooney and Julia Roberts hosted. Obama was there as well. So Obama and Biden are on stage with Jimmy Kimmel, and they talk for 30 minutes or so. I did not watch the fundraiser. At the end of it, they all get up, they're at the stage, waving, crowds, cheering, right? Biden's kind of standing there, taking it in. Obama grabs Biden's hand and turns his body toward the exit. And then as they're walking off together, he puts his arm on his back. So now today and over the weekend, all that I saw on, again, mostly on X, but also this was picked up by some mainstream media too. This was in the New York Post. I guess it depends if you define New York Post as mainstream, but some other media besides X, about how Biden froze and look, did he freeze? I don't know. He was, I've seen the video. He was standing there. He was clearly taking in the applause. Obama did touch his hand, but they turned together and walked out together. So it's one of those things where I'm not sure. I'm not sure where being old and not moving as well as you used to ends, and I'm not sure where I am begins. Do you know what I'm saying? So I don't know. What do you make of all of this and Biden's age in general?
Well, that's a huge question. Just to address some of the points that you made, I mean, meme culture is obviously much more popular than the actual information that's being exchanged. I think we're way past that not being pretty obvious. I don't even think I'm saying anything profound there. If it's funny and it's shareable, it's going to be more popular than the actual information. You know, I told my son very recently, I said, it's amazing that we have all of the information in the world, in the history of our world, available to us instantaneously, and we've somehow become dumber. Like, it's remarkable.
Yes, it really is. It's a great
Like,
point.
I just don't understand it. But on the other hand, I do understand it because I mean, the meme is kind of funny. I saw it on Facebook because I'm old, of Biden looking like he was pooping. The question I had for you though is, what color was Obama's suit when he put his arm around Joe Biden?
It was not. All I know is it wasn't tan this time. It was a
Right, yeah,
blue
yeah.
suit.
No, I make that joke to
a
say
guy
that
wears a
that's the
tan
power
suit
of the
every-
right wing media, though.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone remembers the Obama tan suit thing, but my point here is like, yeah, man, we're headed towards an election. The full force of right wing social media is going to be in play, just like it has the previous two elections, and I imagine it'll even be worse this cycle around. But as it applies specifically to Biden's age, I think it is a huge factor. Just like it was for Nixon sweating under the lights with a young John F. Kennedy. Though in this scenario, Donald Trump happens to be the young John F. Kennedy, so it's a little different.
Yeah.
But you get what I'm saying. Like, that
I
really
do.
hurt Nixon.
No, it hurts him. I mean, I think there's a lot to unpack, as they say. Like,
Yes.
let's say Joe Biden was exactly the same person that he is and had exactly the same record as president, but he was 61 instead of 81.
Yeah.
Where would he be in the polls? You know, if you could run an alternate universe where everything else was the same. I think I don't think it would be a dramatic difference. I don't think he'd be up by 10 points if he was 61 or 51 or 71, but I think it would on the margins. Right now, he's behind. If you look at the average of polls, Real Clear Politics, I looked today. He's ahead. He's behind head to head by a little less than 1 point nationally. I bet he'd be up by a point or two if he were 20 or 30 years younger. Now,
I think you're right.
In terms of so here's the way I break it down. I look at it in 3 ways. Okay. First of all, is Biden the same as he was when he was younger? I mean,
No.
the obvious answer to that is no.
No, he was quick-witted.
Almost nobody is at 81, right? There are a few exceptions. People point to like Warren Buffett. I get it. But even them, I bet if you were around them all the time, like I bet if you spent 24/7 with Warren Buffett, you would, and you did that for decades, you'd probably see a slight slippage. So nobody's the same at 81 as they are at 71 or 51 or 61. So
I don't think if you're over 80, you should be able to drive a vehicle, let alone be president of the United States. So, I mean, what do you want from me, man?
Well, that's another thing I was going to say. So my position, just to be clear, is I don't think anyone over 80 should be president. In North Dakota, they just passed a ballot initiative the other day in their primary that said that no member of the House or Senate from North Dakota can be over 80. And I actually agree with that. I think you probably have to pass a constitutional amendment, but it's crazy to me that we have age minimums for the House, Senate, and presidency, but no age maximum. Because I think you could argue that the dangers of
especially as people live longer,
right?
You know, this is part of the deal. I mean, people are going to live a lot longer, and I don't know if this is ageist or not. I mean, I made the joke about driving a car, but I'm like, there is actual study and research that says is that your fine motor skills by the time you're 80 have deteriorated to such a degree that you can make a reasonable case. Now, does that apply to every 80-year-old? No, but I'm talking like generally for the most part. And someone like Biden, who is clearly showing his age, there are times he looks confused, like he doesn't know where he is. Obviously physically he like really struggles. And I mean, you started out talking about Biden at 72. Dude, he was a completely different human being.
He was. Yeah, and the clips are there. I mean, you can watch them. It's a big difference. But my general point is, I don't think anyone over 80 should be allowed to be president, and that would, by the way, that would disqualify Biden and Trump from running again, because Trump is 78, and I don't think anybody should be able to be in that office, or I would say the House and Senate, over the age of 80. Not because it's impossible for someone to do a good job over 80, but because statistically the numbers show you're getting into a dangerous time,
This is
and
what
you
I
don't
mean.
want to. You don't want to be messing with that, especially with a position like
The
president.
story of Ronald Reagan, I don't think it's like top secret classified information anymore. At the end of his presidency, he had dementia.
Oh, well, I don't think that's ever actually been. There are people that are speculated that. I don't think we have proof of that. But I will say this:
Maybe I
how-
read it on Reddit. I don't know.
Give it. Well, look, he came out or released a statement. I believe it was in '91 that he had Alzheimer's, and he left office in January of '80.
Well, okay, so I stated it too
pretty
firmly.
close.
I said had dementia,
Yeah,
not a medical professional. What I meant was he was not as sharp at the end of his presidency as he was at the beginning, and a lot of it was related to his cognitive ability because it had deteriorated. Whether or not he actually had dementia or he actually had Alzheimer's, I to be clear, that hasn't been top secret information. What I mean is, I think it's been pretty well reported that he was starting to show signs of deterioration later in his presidency cognitively.
Right. And so getting back to the point I was making earlier, I think Biden's not the same. Obviously, that's not that big of an issue to me. I think that's just evident. Another thing that's evident, the second point, is physically he has clearly declined. Yeah. I mean, they've admitted
he can't move as well.
He can't move as well. He has a degenerative condition. I forget if it's the spine or the hip, but whatever it is, it affects his gait.
He's old.
He's old. It's why it takes him so damn long to walk from the helicopter on the lawn of the south lawn of the White House into the White House. So that's the second point. That's obvious. But the thing to me is the third point, which is really the only one that matters. And that is he still mentally sharp enough to handle the job? That's the one that matters. I mean, FDR was in a wheelchair. I don't care if the president's movements are stiff. I don't care if he doesn't get around well. I wouldn't even care if he didn't walk. I mean, like if I thought Greg Abbott, if Greg Abbott were the best person to be president, he shouldn't be disqualified. The governor of Texas is in a wheelchair. So when I see Biden, and again, I watched that D-Day speech. He did really good. He did a really good job. I watched the State of the Union. He did a really good job. Does he have some slip-ups, some senior moments, some misstatements? Absolutely. But I think the other point is presidential elections are choices, not referendums. And it's a good thing for Biden and for Trump, I would say, because they're both incredibly unpopular. It's a choice. And it's essentially a choice between these two men. And so you're Joe Biden, you're not running against some 50-year-old who's in peak physical condition, who is, some giant intellect. You're running against Donald Trump. Okay. And if I watch occasionally Donald Trump speeches, and he rambles incoherently at times. Now, do I think that's because he has dementia? No, I think it's just because he's not very articulate. He loses his train of thought. He's not very disciplined. He doesn't have a good attention span. I think those are the reasons. But the end result is you get a lot of nonsense with Donald Trump when he speaks. He doesn't articulate himself clearly. And so that's who your opponent is. And one of the traps I think Republicans walk into is they overplay their hand with Biden. Is he old? Yes. Has he declined? Yes. But they may, if you follow Trump or right-wing media, you would think Biden is like gone. Like they're just, he's just around
they're doing
behind the
job.
Oval Office. And people are just coming in and making the decisions for him. Like, here, sir, sign this. And that's not the case. And I think in this debate, it really actually worked, which is coming up 10 days from today. It really works to Biden's favor because the bar of expectations are low.
Yeah, but they're low on the other side too. Like, I don't think Trump has some super high expectation coming into a debate. Trump at a debate is like the early days of the Howard Stern radio program. You're only turning in to see what he says and to see what happens. I mean, and to bring this full circle, it's about X and all the memes you're going to get.
Right.
It's I don't know. In terms of how much, I don't think this debate matters at all. I mean, because I really do. I know you believe that there is evidence that there are still people that haven't made up their mind on who they're going to vote for. I
Yeah.
need to meet these people because I think they're lying because people lie
Well,
a lot.
they're the double haters. They're the people who, for the most part, they are the people who don't like either Biden or
Yeah,
Trump.
but
And
I
they're
don't like either Biden or Trump. What
well,
does that
okay.
mean?
There's two groups of double haters, right? They're the people like you and me who wish we had better
Better
options,
options, right?
but know who we're voting for, like
Sure.
right. But then there's a second group who don't like either option and are considering RFK Jr.
Oh, for
or
God's
or
sake.
the Green Party with Jill Stein or Cornel West who's running as an independent
Ugh.
or not voting at all. And that number is way higher than it was in 2020. There was a New York Times poll that said 19% are double haters this year, which was way more than it was in 2020. And those people are probably going to decide the election. And so for them, I think it does matter. And events matter. And I look, I think Biden, and I'm kind of going out on a limb here based on all the stuff we've already said. I think he's going to do really well at the debate. I think
Oh,
he's
I
still
do too.
I think he's still, especially for one night. We saw this at the State of the Union. I think when he needs it, he can summon it. You know, he's like that aging baseball pitcher who's at the end of the line and lost a lot off the fastball, but it's just like, give me one more. You give me one more start, like reach back for a little
Are
something extra.
performance enhancing drugs illegal for the president? Because I
don't think so.
You
Not
mentioned
that
an
I know
old
of.
baseball player. I think he needs some human growth hormone. I think is what he's going to need before this debate. They got to give him something. I mean, I do think it favors Biden. I'm just saying that in the grand scheme of things, for what we're talking about, I think the memes on X and Facebook or whatever social media are far more effective than changing votes than a debate is in 2024. I just do.
You might be right. And that's crazy to think about that because that, I mean, that has never been the case before, but it might,
No,
we
but
have
I
hit
mean,
that
dude,
point.
things change really fast.
They
I
do.
mean, exponentially because of the way that human beings interact and what we're
Yeah.
focused on and what we care about. I mean, debates used to have a huge part of our culture. The State of the Union is another great example where I used to turn in the State of the Union every year, but now I don't watch the State of the Union anymore because I know what they're going to say. I
Yeah.
know what their talking points are. I know what they're going to need to hit on. Do I need to actually watch it take place? The other reason I don't have to watch it take place is because you got to remember before I wasn't getting a transcript of the entire speech. I couldn't watch the State of the Union when I wanted to watch it. Now, if I want to watch the State of the Union and I want to get excerpts from it, I can just go watch it on YouTube. But most people don't even do that. They tune in to their favorite podcast to hear what they think about the thing that happened that they probably didn't even watch because they have an agenda that they want to get crossed so they can swing vote. I mean, I'm sorry to leave it all out, but that's what's happening.
Yeah. Or they're scrolling through X or Facebook, if you're old like you, and they see a 10 or 20 or 30-second clip. And that is their sense of the debate. And you're right. Those memes and that, because especially when it feeds into the pre-existing narrative, and the narrative is Biden's old and he can't do the job anymore. That's the narrative that, you know, many people on the right believe. And so anything that feeds into that is probably more effective than whatever happens in the debate.
One last comparison.
I was just saying, it's sad if we get to a point where events just don't matter anymore. Do you know what I mean? Where all that matters is the filter through we see it through.
This is what I'm driving at, right? The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. That was appointment television, right? And then you had some competition, and then you had Letterman and Leno, and those were huge. They were ratings monsters. Now, the shows almost don't matter because it's all about getting the clips that go on YouTube and on social media. That's how they're generating money because they're not doing it through viewership anymore. People aren't tuning in to watch Jimmy Fallon, but if something funny happens on the Jimmy Fallon show and it ends up on somewhere, like that's how they're going to generate revenue. And I think politics and a lot of things in life have really taken that shape. And it's where how revenue is driven. It's how we make money at the end of the day. Like that's what it all comes down to. Now in politics, it's a little different, but how are you going to get the most votes? By driving the most eyeballs and getting the most clicks and views and changing people's minds. That's how you do it.
I did want to get a gut check from you because I know you said before that you think Trump is going to win this year. What's your percentage? As of today, give me your percentage that you think Trump. How confident are you?
Wow, that's a tough one. Um, I'm this is gonna seem like such a high number, and it's subjective. It's based on nothing, but 80%, man. I
Wow,
really do.
wow. So you
Just
give
because,
Biden a 20% chance.
yeah, but a lot of it is part of what I have probably not been talking about very well so far on this show, but it's how fast things swing back and forth. Before you used to have like these 8-year cycles, right? It was very rare you had like a Jimmy Carter where it would swing back so quickly in like a 4-year term. And obviously there were factors involved with that, but in our lifetimes, it's generally been two-term presidents, and it would go from a Republican to a Democrat to a Republican to a Democrat, and you would have this back and forth. But I think that's sped up. I think the pendulum swings even faster now, and
Mm.
I think that we all experienced the 4 years that Trump was in office, and your experience in that depends on who you are and where you live and what you care about. But Joe Biden is the polar opposite of that, and it's gone in the other direction. I mean, basically Trump went on Twitter and said, we don't let transgender people in the military. And the Pentagon had to tell him we don't make policy on Twitter. Like, you have to like make a request and this is how government works. And then here comes Joe Biden just giving everyone surgeries. And I know I'm not making it about that. To be clear, what I'm saying is like that thing may not matter to like most people, but that is a huge shift, a huge swing in the ideals and the politics that are happening on a daily basis in America. And I think they've swung so far now, it's going to swing back even more violently. I think we could see this trend for a very long time, depending on who the candidates are.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And social media definitely helps, and the AI algorithms speed that up. I'd put it at, as of today, I'd say 50% chance it's Trump, 45 it's Biden.
That's cowardly.
And then I'll go 5% somebody else.
No,
And
come on. Oh, there's
somebody
else.
else is most likely is a Democrat. No, let me rephrase that. I'll change that. I'll say 55 that it's Trump, 40 that it's Biden, and then 5% it's another Democrat, not Biden.
I know you want to. I know you want to shift on this, but I've been dying to ask you this question.
Yes.
What does it say about Kamala Harris that they will not run her?
Kamala.
Whatever.
What does it say about her?
What does it say about her? Well, what does it say about us that like?
Yeah, I was saying, wow. So it's. I think the first part of your question is it's more than just her, but what it says about her for the part she plays in it, she's not a very good politician.
Yeah,
I mean, but we knew that in 2020 she flamed out in the Democratic primary. Yeah. She didn't even make it to Iowa, and she had a ton of buzz early in that process. Remember, 2020 was wide open. You had Biden there, but he wasn't doing well. Bernie, Elizabeth Warren, like Kamala Harris, African-American, younger woman from California, biggest state, huge Democrat state. She had a chance, and she didn't even make. She has not performed well, and I think that's obvious. And I think if she were really popular, I think Biden, I'm not saying he definitely would have stepped aside, but I think the odds of him stepping aside would have gone way up.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
But I don't think it's a guarantee that he would have, because at the end of the day, it's a personal choice, right? But I think the pressure on him to step aside would have been more. And I think he would have felt more that, okay, I beat Trump. I did my job. I accomplished a lot in my first term, which he has. And now I want to be the bridge to that next generation. Here's Kamala Harris. But the polling throughout his term has been consistent that she actually performs worse against Trump than he does. And I think it says that she has not been very effective as a politician. And that has put Democrats in a spot where there was no clear alternative. So there's no reason really to run somebody else. And that's how you end up with an 81-year-old nominee.
Yeah. I didn't ask the question to answer my own question, but I have thought that not running Kamala.
You got it.
Harris, or everyone's favorite dark horse candidate, Michelle Obama, or, you know, to go completely off the deep end, someone in the vein of like AOC, is because I think that galvanizes the right even further. I think when you have that type of candidate, that profile, specific profile, being a woman, particularly a woman of color, I think it would galvanize a lot of people on the other side. I think they'd show up in more droves. I think people have less of a problem with the old white guy.
Well, I don't know. I think Kamala Harris was not a very good politician. It has nothing or very little to do with the fact that she's a black woman.
No, but you don't think that type of candidate would galvanize the right even further?
So here's what I would say. If Michelle Obama, if a Biden resigned during the Democratic convention and Michelle Obama were just given the nomination,
yeah,
I think she would have a chance to win. And if she didn't win, I don't think it's because she's a black woman. I think it's because she didn't perform well. She's never been on the stage before. Like, what I mean to say is, let me be clear. Are there racist people who don't want to see a black woman become president? Sure. Those people are already in the Trump camp.
No. I know,
That's
but I
what
didn't even mean it that way. I didn't mean it in terms of like racism or like not wanting a female president. I just think that there is a certain comfort level that our undecided voters that I don't believe exist have more comfort in the old white guy than they do in the young upstart.
Maybe. I don't know.
There's going to be, I don't know if the turnout in this election is going to be what people think. I think it may be lower than last
I think it'll be lower than 2020. I think it will be. 2020 was record high in terms of total votes and percent, even on a percentage basis, it was one of the highest we've seen in a very long time. I think it will drop for the reasons that we talked about. People aren't as excited as they were in 2020. They have much higher negative opinions of both of these men. But here's what I would say to this. We could talk more about this in the coming weeks. I think especially if
we got time.
If Biden doesn't perform well in the debate, this will be a big topic is would it be better to run somebody else? My opinion on that has always been up to this point, no. That I think the risk of throwing an incumbent president aside who beat Donald Trump and has some accomplishments to run on is more of a risk than running an 81-year-old incumbent president. But I think it's a legitimate debate. I'm not saying it's necessarily an easy call, but I will say if you get to July and Biden's still behind and he doesn't perform well in the debate, or he does and it doesn't matter, then I think it gets very close to being to the point where the risk of having an open convention and choosing a new ticket is less than the risk of running a ticket you think is going to lose. I don't think we're there yet, but I think there comes a point where that's a very legitimate conversation. All right, Brian, turning to the world of sports. We're recording this on Monday night, so Game 5 of the NBA Finals is going on. The Celtics are up 3-1. They might be closing it out by the time you hear this, or may have closed this out. So we can talk about that later. Let's talk about your favorite sport, Major League Baseball. We're at roughly the halfway point. You love baseball. Give me kind of a first half report. You told me we were talking about the show earlier today that you think this has been an incredibly exciting baseball season. So tell me why.
I do. The reason that, look, you've made the comment before that I'm like the youngest baseball fan alive, which given if you could see me with my gray hair and my gray beard, I don't think that's any longer than the case, though it might have been at one point. But I just think as a sport, baseball is finally, after a long time of getting beat up where you had all these sports shows about how we're going to fix baseball, I think it's arrived at a place where it's pretty comfortable. Like all the numbers across the board in terms of viewership, attendance, all those metrics that matter, they're way up. Is part of it gambling? Maybe. That's probably a little bit part of it. Something else to bet on. It certainly happens every day. It's very consistent, so that bodes well. All the rule changes that have taken place. I do have to say, going to a baseball game now, and for it not to have these huge delays, for me, buddy, it makes it so much more enjoyable to watch. Like, because here's the thing that it makes you do. It makes you actually have to pay attention. Where before you could go to a baseball game and there were long periods of time you didn't have to do anything. What were you
Rob
gonna say?
Manfred took a lot of shit for these
He did.
for these changes and other things, but you cannot deny. And I remember saying this time, and I'm not nearly as big of a baseball fan as you, but I totally supported not every change they made. Like I hate the runner on second
I don't
base
like
in
it
the
either,
10th
but
inning. I don't
whatever.
like, but the big change, which was the pitch clock,
Yes.
I love that move. I
Great.
said it was long overdue. I'm so glad they stuck with it and they basically forced it down the player's throat, because making these games 2 hours 30 minutes instead of 3:10, but also like you said, it was never really about the total time of the game. It was about the pace, because like we talked about at the beginning of the show, human beings, I mean, you could argue human beings have gone through more changes in the way that we consume information than at any point in our lifetime, maybe ever. Like in a very short period of time, our attention spans are shorter on average as humans, especially young people who never knew anything prior to social media. It's got to be quick. There's got to be action. Let's fucking go. And baseball is, to the extent that it can, because
Yeah,
it still has a leisurely pace. I mean,
does.
it's not basketball, right? It's not the NBA where it's up and down. But as much as it can, I think baseball has done that. And look, you mentioned the numbers are what they are. I saw this from Sports Illustrated. MLB attendance between June 14th and June 17th or 16th. So this past weekend, the 45 games on those 3 days drew nearly 1.7 million fans. That's the biggest weekend in MLB since 2008 in terms of attendance.
Yeah.
That's pretty freaking impressive. So you got to say, based on these metrics, it is working.
And at the end of the day, that's the commissioner's job, is to do exactly what is happening right now. So in that way, even though I'm not a huge fan of Rob Manfred for a variety of reasons, I think he's done a good job there. There's a great video on YouTube of a New York Yankees Boston Red Sox playoff game where more time is taken in between two pitches than an entire inning that was played. That's amazing.
It really
is. Not a whole inning. I'm sorry, a half inning. A half inning.
Yeah.
To be clear, I've misspoken a few times today, but yeah, to where it goes through. But perhaps as a fan, and I think this does matter a lot, your major market teams are great. You have Ohtani in LA. Aaron Judge is on fire in New York. His numbers in the month of June are insanity. He may hit 60 home runs again. I don't think he's going to keep this pace, but it's a remarkable pace that he's on. And, I've mentioned the other markets before that matter a lot. I mean, the Philadelphia market matters a lot in baseball. When the Phillies are good, baseball is better because Philadelphia fans are crazy, and it brings a lot to the game. So I don't think anyone who's not watching baseball is necessarily going to tune in. I will admit that it is a bit of an acquired taste, but there's so much drama in baseball, and in storylines and things that are happening. I love it, and I wish more people would watch it. But I guess at a very high level, I wanted to talk about it because for a long time, people thought baseball was going to die.
Yeah. Well,
I was never one of those people, but that was the sports. You hosted a sports talk show,
Attendance was dropping, and TV ratings are still not great. I mean, the baseball's national games don't draw huge audiences. The World Series ratings have really gone down. But
the local games do, and that's what matters.
Yeah. And they're going to have to get their local things situated, just like the NBA and NHL with the shit show that Bally Sports is going through in their bankruptcy. So that's something to watch for. But yeah, as of now, they're in good shape, and the game has survived that little blip of a downturn and come out stronger on the other side, at least so far. All right, Brian, it's time. No further ado. House of the Dragon.
Yep.
We've been looking forward to this one for a while. Debut of season 2 was last night. For those who don't know, I don't know how you don't know, but this is the prequel show to Game of Thrones. It was set, several hundred years before the events of Game of Thrones? About 200 years. And the first season was a real success, a rating smash for HBO and Max. So now season 2 is dropped. Episode 1 was out last night. You and I both watched it. Give me your thoughts.
There's so many directions we could go here. Spoiler alert for those that have not watched it yet. So I would just say the ending was a bit hard for me to take. the end of the episode.
I see. I really enjoyed the last 10 minutes or so. Now, what you're saying because you didn't appreciate the way it was done, or the subject
No.
matter?
That part was great.
Yeah,
Just the murder of a child.
the murder of a child.
The-
You know what? I thought it was fine. Listen to me. Like I thought child murder was great. Like
Yeah.
they didn't show that child actually being murdered. I mean, you know,
No. But it was so because
also in this world, I mean, like, is child murder bad? Yeah,
Oh.
but compared to some of the shit in the Game of Thrones universe, I don't know that it's a lot worse than some of the other things we've seen. Yeah, if you missed the episode, it basically the way season 1 ended was the child of, is it Rhaenyra?
it was
The
Luke,
middle child was his name's Luke. He was eaten by a dragon.
by Aemon.
And his dragon was bitten in half.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the first blow of this war, the Civil War, Targaryen Civil War that House of the Dragon's based on. So now in return, a child of the king, Aemon, was murdered in this episode. A baby, a young boy
Jaehaerys.
murdered in the crib, Jaehaerys, by two characters who we didn't even
Blood
meet.
and cheese.
Blood and cheese, they're called, which I thought that was actually a really cool. That's when you know you have a good show that's working, is when you can kind of go with a couple of characters who we had never seen before this episode. We knew nothing about. And then they basically were the stars of the last 10 minutes of the show. And I thought that was a really, that's when you know a show is working.
Look, it's like MMA. You watch an MMA fight and it's brutal, but you have a reasonable expectation of what's going to happen in that fight. There's going to be blood. Someone's probably going to get knocked unconscious. But then every now and again, someone's arm just snaps in half and you kind of turn away from the screen. Like, did they have to? Why is that bone sticking out of that person where their skin used to be? That's how I felt about the end. Like, I know I'm watching MMA. I'm just saying that it sometimes I know they didn't show it. It's not about the visual. For me, as a father, I thought about the queen having to choose a child to die. Like, so this means I'm invested in it, right? Because I'm
Yes.
emoting. Like, I
Right.
have a feeling about it. If I just felt like, what are you gonna do? Child murder. I think that would be a problem for me as a human being, number one. But that's a different story for a different day. But it means I just care about the show.
Right. Well, I would say, so for me personally, because I saw some people online were kind of comparing it and making fun of the comparison to the Red Wedding, which was
What?
which was the
Stop.
famous twist in Game of Thrones where there was a bunch of people murdered, including one of the people that at that time, the Stark kid, who you thought maybe was going to be one of the stars of the show. So to me, in terms of twists and emotional impact at the end of a show, this one was nowhere close to the
No,
Red
not
Wedding,
even. Get
or
outta here.
or I would say to Ned Stark getting his head chopped off
No.
in season 1 of Game of Thrones. So it didn't register on that level for me. But I want to be clear. I don't want to take anything away from this episode as a whole, because you and I have discussed this before. I liked season 1 of House of the Dragon, but I didn't love it. I did not think it was at the level of Game of Thrones prior to the last few seasons when
Right.
Game of Thrones went off the rails. I did not think it was playing in that league. And the reason for that mainly was because I thought they mishandled the time jump in season 1. I thought that was kind of haphazard.
They had a lot of story to tell and not a lot.
They had
of
a
time
lot
to
of
do
story
it,
to
man.
tell, and I just didn't think it quite worked for me. I liked the show, but I didn't love it. I will say, after one episode, they have stepped their game up in season 2, and maybe all it took was getting into the main storyline, because I thought episode 1 was really good. Not just that last 10-minute scene you and I have been talking about, but I thought the whole episode, they did a really good job. And this is one of the things that first episodes of a season often have to do. They've got to catch you up and set the stage of, okay, where is everybody physically? Like, where are they located? What are they thinking? What are the stakes? What has happened since the end of the previous season? So you've got to do all that while at the same time trying to present something that's like compelling. And I thought they did a great job of that. The show looked good. Like, the shots were great. The sets were great. The dragons were cool. The acting was on point. The direction, the episode flowed, it moved, it bounced from place to place and character to character, but you always knew where you were and what the stakes were of a particular scene. I thought balancing all of that, like, dare I say, that episode was Game of Thrones level.
Yeah.
It was really good, I thought.
I could talk about this for an hour, and clearly we don't have the time for that, and you probably don't have the energy. But one of so I could go a lot of different ways, is what I'm saying. I thought one of the coolest parts is Rhaenyra had one line in the whole episode, and she's a main character. I want Aemond. That was
I
it.
want Aemon.
Man, she
Yeah.
did a lot of great acting for that to be her only line in that show.
Now what? So she said that, and then Matt Smith's character, her husband slash uncle, then shows up in King's Landing on a boat and
Well, he had
bribes.
his murder cloak on, so
He
we knew
has
something
murder.
bad was
Yes,
going to happen.
and he bribes the Blood and Cheese characters. Why? By the way, why are they called Blood and Cheese?
Well, Cheese is the rat catcher.
Okay.
And Blood used to, I guess that's just his name, but he used to be part of the Kingsguard.
Okay. So blood. He shows up to bribe Blood and Cheese because of that one line Rhaenyra said, right? Get me
Right.
Aemon, the guy.
And as he
her
often
son.
does, he takes things and runs with them. He's a
Yes.
man of action.
Right.
I think
so
that's one thing that we really learned
Yes.
is that you don't have to provide him with details. You can just give him commander's intent, and he's going to carry out a plan.
Also, he doesn't sit around and ruminate a lot. Like, he's more of an action guy than like a meetings guy. You know, he would be one of those guys in 2024. He would not want to show up for the Zoom meeting. He'd be like, could you just send me a memo? Like, give me a couple lines on this. So my question to you is this. So I get why he did what he did with Blood and Cheese. But when Blood and Cheese got into the Red Keep, right? And they're going around room to
Yep.
room.
Yep.
They're searching for Aemon.
Yep.
He described what Aemon looked like.
Yep.
Guy with one eye, long blonde hair, 20-ish maybe. Why did they not keep looking for him? And why did they say, "Oh, here's another baby.
So you got to rewatch
Let's
it.
just kill a baby"?
So you missed
Tell
a very
me
you missed
what
a very
happened.
important part.
Okay.
Is they Cheese asked, well, what if we can't find him? And that's when Damon says, we shouldn't be too hard to find. Long blonde hair, one eye. I heard he's a bit of a fighter.
Right.
But then they cut off. So it's possible that Damon, and maybe they'll reveal this later, could have said, well, if you can't find him, then, just take out one of the heirs.
One of the other sons.
The name of the show is a son for a son.
A son for a son. Yeah.
Like, that's the name of the show. So I think it's possible that Damon was like, well, hey, if you can't find him, any of these others will do.
Yeah.
Because who would you rather go up against? A 4-year-old child or a skilled dragon riding warrior? I know what I would choose.
Yeah, I think I'd take the child.
Especially if you're Cheese.
Last week we had a lengthy conversation about mid TV and how I kind of felt like I was going off this article this New York Times critic wrote about how TV's kind of gotten like not terrible, not great. This episode, if they keep this up, this season is going to be great. If this was the first one, I am really excited for this season. The Bears coming out later this month, which has been great before. I just finished Ripley, which I thought was fantastic. So there's a little run here of shows that I'm starting to get excited about. After watching a lot of TV for the last couple of years, I was like, I'm starting to get excited here. So I'm ready for House of the Dragon, man. After being kind of lukewarm on season 1, I'm all in now. They got me.
Well, we've talked about this a few times on here, but how do you feel about the Acolyte basically getting pooped on? I mean, I haven't watched it, but I haven't read anything positive.
So last week we discussed The Acolyte, and I had seen the first 2 episodes that they debuted. And I told you that I thought it was kind of in between the great Star Wars of Andor and the first season of Mandalorian, and then everything else, which has been to really shitty.
Yeah.
So that was my initial take on the first 2 episodes. But episode 3 came out since we've last talked, and it was a disaster.
Ooh.
I mean, it is bad.
Oh,
so now there's no question. I was hopeful for The Acolyte. I saw some signs of life in the first 2 episodes, and then episode 3, man, it was just, there's these covenant of witches that kind of sort of use the Force, and the Jedi watch them. But the details of the plot almost don't even matter.
Right.
Because the execution is so bad. The acting is stiff. The writing is terrible. It's not really clear exactly. And then this is great. So the witches and the covenant, which of course includes no men, they have a child.
Of course they do.
Of course they do. So
Like
it's
Brittany
very
Griner.
so it's very PC that 2024 these women got together and they cooked up a child somehow without the help of a gentleman. So, but that's not the I'm gonna correct, that's not the reason I didn't like the episode. I can look past that, whatever. The episode was a mess.
Now, this
It
brings
really
up
was.
an excellent question that's in the vein of our show. Are you going to stick with it? Are you going to bail?
I have seen every episode of every live action Star Wars show on Disney Plus. I don't do the cartoons, but the live action shows I've
Because you're
seen
an
every
adult.
episode. I'm an adult. I've seen every episode, and I've seen every movie, live action movie. And this one will be the closest I have come to not watching.
I'm
the
excited
end.
to find out next week.
I'm undecided if I'm going to watch the end. I will give it one more. I will give it episode 4, and all my bar is low, right? My bar is like Joe Biden at the debate. You don't have to hit a home run. Like if you get me a solid single to right field, I'll watch the rest of the season. But if it's another episode like episode 3 and I see that level, like who greenlit this at Disney? Like especially with you and I have talked about this before, how the Star Wars franchise and the Marvel franchise, they need quality over quantity.
Can you hear my idiot dog in the background? I'm sorry.
No, I didn't hear.
Okay,
put it in the lab and figure it out. But to put this out, luckily Andor season 2, I think, is coming out by
to save the day.
So
thank God. Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yeah, because Star Wars is in. If the Acolyte episode 3 is any indication, they are in bad shape.
When's the next Mandalorian?
I was really stunned by how bad it was. I really was, because the first 2 were not that bad. They weren't. They were fine. They were This one though,
just not good.
Brutal. I'll check when it comes out. Do you have any other reviews this week while I do that?
I don't have any other reviews, not for this week. I've been pretty busy, so I was excited to get the House of the Dragon in now and really take it in, which, I mean, thank God that show's back.
I know. Oh, we needed it in our lives. I did. It was so well done. I was so happy because I wanted to be successful as someone who loved Game of Thrones and loves this kind of storytelling. It even had some of that Game of Thrones vibe, like some sex in it. Obviously, we talked about the violence. In fact, how about what's the princess's name? The queen's name, I should say, who has the baby, who's holding the baby in the end, who's married to her bride. I forget her name, but she carries her living baby, who wasn't murdered, downstairs and walks in on her mother getting it on with the King's Guard.
Kristen Cole.
So let's see. It says Andor. Okay, I was wrong. Andor season 2. 2025, they're saying now. Oh, I gotta wait until next year.
I'm sorry.
Oh, and then let's see. They're talking about the next one up is going to be, it looks like later this year, Skeleton Crew, which is 8 episodes. That's supposed to come out sometime later this year. The Mandalorian season 4 is TBD. Skeleton Crew takes place.
So it's going to be a while because that's Skeleton a lot Crew, of development.
By the way, yeah, the next one is Skeleton Crew. It takes place in the same time frame as The Mandalorian, and it's an interconnected spin-off telling a coming-of-age story about 4 children who make a discovery on their home planet, get lost in the galaxy, and go on an adventure to get back home. Maybe. Jude Law is in it. Jude Law stars. Maybe. We'll see. But I'm just so disappointed by the Acolyte and Star Wars in general.
I'm sorry, man.
I never thought they could screw this up this bad, especially when I watched the first season of The Mandalorian. I was like, oh, they've got this. They know what they need to do. They've got the formula. This is going to be great.
Well, and they did have Baby Yoda. Like, that's cheating.
Baby Yoda, but also,
Baby Yoda is like putting brown sugar in a recipe. Like, you know it's going to be good.
But it was gritty, and it was kind of raw and different than Star Wars, and not necessarily.
Pedro Pascal was great.
Pedro Pascal was great, and I'm like, man, they have figured this out. That's going to be great, and really, other than Andor, they really haven't hit since. Yeah. And it's so sad.
I don't want to beat a dead horse on this show, but that creating anything is hard, man. It just shows you how hard it is.
It is. It's very hard. It's very hard. Kudos to the creators, Brian. It's not the critic that counts. Oh, we talked about that last week. You said you don't, because you were saying you don't like critics, remember?
Yeah, no, I remember very well. I hold by that.
And I said your rant on critics reminded me of the Teddy Roosevelt critics quote. So Teddy Roosevelt, president of the United States circa early 1900s. And you said you were not familiar with that.
I wasn't.
And here's what he said. He said, it is not God, I don't know if he wrote this or he said it in his speech, but this is one of like the great, like this is a quote that's almost so good that you don't think a human could do it.
Okay.
Like you don't think anybody could do this. Like if I were there, I would have probably just like been drop the mic, Teddy. You got my vote. He said, it's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbled or when the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is
Yeah.
marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes short again and again, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while doing greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who knew neither victory nor defeat. I mean, are you kidding me? Like, slow clap for Teddy Roosevelt. I would have I would have ran through a wall for that guy. Like, are you kidding me? No wonder he got the Rough Riders so fired up back in the day.
It makes me think something I've actually talked to my dear wife about many times, which is I miss the way that people used to write and communicate and speak.
Yeah.
Look, not everyone is going to be, a great poet or, a wordsmith, and that's fine. But the show Billions, since we're in the entertainment side of things, like one of the things I loved about that show was that Paul Giamatti's character put a lot of importance on eloquent speech, whether that was like in a dissertation he was giving, even in something small, or if it was like an actual speech he was giving as like politician. But like I love those things. The problem is that I'm in such minority because people
Right.
now see it as pretentious.
Right.
Like when when you use that type of language in like everyday conversation, people don't like it.
No.
It
No, you and I'm totally agree with you 100%, and we are definitely in the minority. And I think, look at our politics right now. I think that look at the way Donald Trump speaks. Look at the way Marjorie Taylor Greene speaks. I mean, Charlemagne the God was talking about this the other day. He's a liberal, and he was talking about the problem for Democrats isn't their policies; it's they don't speak the way that Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene speak. And what he meant by that is they speak in a way that is very easy to understand and gets right to the point and the heart of it. And they don't think too deeply about it and don't try to explain it too much. They just give you that short burst. And that is what matters right now. And again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. We have these incredibly short attention spans, and social media drives us toward less and less engagement in terms of things that take a long time or are complicated or are not necessarily easy to understand. And so you're right. I think there's no question that in most areas of life, sadly, it is better to not be eloquent. It's better to be short and direct and just like kind of raw and dirty with your language. 100% agree with you.
It's funny because many years ago, I lost my keys outside of a Staples and hilarity ensued. So I went on Facebook and I basically wrote a novella, but I did it in such a fashion to where it was comedic, but not only was it comedic, like I was really weaving a tale of like all the things that transpired and like the minor detail, and in those details, what was funny about them as they were happening. And it ended up being probably like, I don't know, 10 paragraphs of 4 or 5 sentences each. So what's that, like a 5-minute read? Nothing too much. And it got a pretty good reception. And I wasn't doing it for the reception. I was doing it because I enjoy writing. I enjoyed describing the things and doing so in a comedic fashion. But there was one guy who said, man, that's a lot of words for I dropped my keys in the grate. And he was doing it as a joke because he knew me and he knew that would drive me crazy because I hate that. Like, it really bothers me that we have we frown upon intellect and we give like false intellect credence these days.
No,
And
you're
I
right.
sound like an old man yelling at a crowd right now. I do, and I get that. But goddamn, Teddy Roosevelt, that was beautiful.
It's beautiful. And even if you go back, like I like to read sometimes books about the founding fathers. And I know that was a completely different era. And obviously it was almost 250 years ago, actually. We're coming up on that anniversary. So I get it. I know English has changed, and I'm not saying we should talk like that. But it is sometimes I read some of the things they write, like Madison and Jefferson and Hamilton, and I think, are they the same species as our current politicians? Like it is, and again, I'm not saying that Biden should start talking
No,
in,
me neither.
1800s English. But
There's
what
a
I'm saying
healthy
is,
middle here, just like
right,
most things.
but what I'm saying is, what's the modern equivalent of that? Do you know what I mean? And I would say there is none on in terms of politicians. There is
Not with politicians.
there
No.
is no modern equivalent to how people used to speak and some of the things they used to say that was just so beautiful and eloquent. And God, we don't. And when we get somebody who kind of comes close, we go crazy. And the latest example was Barack Obama. I mean, Barack Obama was he was closest of any politician, I think, in modern times to that tradition of being a really articulate guy.
Do you
All right,
know who Christopher Hitchens is? He's passed
yes,
away.
but
I used to really like
Christopher
Hitchens because I thought he's a great example of someone who did an excellent job of towing that line. And some would say even he was pretentious. I could see that for sure. But I thought he did a really amazing job of walking that fine line of speaking like a highly intelligent person, doing so in a way that had humor, but also supported the argument that he was making.
Yeah,
I
agree.
Like, to me, he's the perfect example of what I would consider a healthy middle in terms of not only our discourse, but our way of speaking, our way of communicating with one another, or how we debate. That is just gone.
It is. It really is. And another thing I liked about Hitchens, and this may have been why he was able to do this so well, one of the reasons, is because he wasn't part of a tribe.
Right.
He was just speaking, and he had some idiosyncratic views, some left, some right. And I think it's easier to talk when you're not constantly thinking of how do I have to shape my opinion for my team. And that's part of the reason I think people aren't as articulate is because they are always trying to process it through a filter of not what's the right answer, what's honest. It's okay, how can I sell this? Because this is just what I need to sell. And let's be honest, Donald Trump, I'm not saying it's all his fault, but he does play a big part in this. I mean, his crass way of speaking, as effective as it may be to his base, I think it's not I want to be clear. That is not the worst thing Donald Trump has done to our politics. Okay. It might not even be in the top 2 or 3, but it is on the list of negative impacts, I would say, of Donald Trump to the body politics in America. All right. Yeah. Anything else, Brian? Now that we sound like old stuffy.
I know. I had a whole thing that I was going to do on pig butchering scams, but I can save it for later. Have you heard of pig butchering scams?
I have not. That sounds like a lot. I'll tell you what. Wrap a little bow on that, and
all right, I'll put a pin
bring that. Yeah, we'll put a pin in that. We'll circle back to that. Next
Jesus,
week.
Synergy.
Yes, we have to have synergy. What's the culture we have here, Brian? We're all about culture. Okay. Thank you for listening. Make sure you follow us on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. For Brian Johnson, I'm Eric Messersmith. We hope you enjoyed the show, but if not, please take no offense.